morning to the second day of the conference. People on the move, still stuck in the corridors to the EU. I'm sorry we start a little bit later than anticipated or than stated in the agenda, but that's also due to, because we had a very intensive discussions yesterday on the first day of the conference, and we also had watched two very, I would say, painful and emotionally two documentaries that, yes, really got to the emotions, and on a young boy who was, or on young boys on the Balkan route, following them on their way. And today we will discuss with several institutions, with MEPs, and open the discussion to, or go to the, let's say, more policy and more meta level. And I'm glad to have the first panel, or part of the first panel, sitting here. Part is online then, and I would say let's start.
Right. Hello, good morning. Thanks all for coming. Thanks for the hospitality here. I know it's a bit early and we're gonna dive into some heavy stuff. As you've seen from the title, it's human rights at the EU's external border, or better said, lack thereof. And there's going to be some discussion about the legal aspects concerning the situation of human rights at the EU borders. I think this is a very vital discussion to have. I don't know if the panelists will agree with me, but for me, at least, the EU has always been this area that prided itself in defending human rights and being a beacon for the world, and on how to defend them. That we are the ones, the liberal ones, the ones that are always open to vulnerable people. And in the past years, unfortunately, this has been proven time and again is not the case. And not only that, but we have also seen at various levels some great ineffectiveness of supervision, accountability, and I don't know if punishment is the correct word, but anyway, restitution. So I'm very happy to have with me some people who can speak authoritatively about the subject. We're going to start off with Erik Markart, who's an MEP with the Green Party, and he's going to be joining us at some point, I suppose, from online. I'm glad to have Sara, who's here from the Center of Peace Studies in Croatia. She's going to be discussing a very, very important, apart from all the work they've done, a very, very important case about a young girl who died, and after, I don't know, many years, the family found justice from the European Court of Human Rights. I'm having Joanny here, is from the IOM, one of the institutional actors involved in many places around the globe. Well, you have your pros and cons. Maybe we go into them later. And Hannah Hakiki, who's from the senior legal advisor at the European Center of Constitutional and Human Rights in Germany, a very active institution. She'll also be joining us from afar. Hi, she's there. So I don't know do we have Erik online or not?
I hope so.
Erik, oh, hi, Erik. It's good to see you. So, Erik, I understand. First of all, you would like to talk about some experiences you had in Croatia, right, at the border, that you can draw some conclusions about what's happening there. But given your position as a parliamentarian, and also your very large experience in Greece, especially in hotspot islands and Lesbos, if you can put all this into perspective and tell us what the European Parliament, which for many people is like the last hope that we have in Europe for some accountability and some sort of pushing forward human rights at the EU borders. How is it going? Are you being frustrated? Are you making any progress? What's happening on this front? Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Yes, thank you. I will keep it rather short, that we have some time for discussions too, because I actually have to leave at 10, unfortunately. And I'm also very interested and hearing the other perspectives and maybe come into discussion. So I think what we experienced the last weeks is pretty interesting from a like rather broad political point of view. Of course, the suffering of the Ukrainian people is like heartbreaking, and it's very good that the European Union is acting fast, opening the borders and giving people at least a perspective to work, some social support, and a bed to sleep. And for me, it's kind of strange to understand that the last 5 years I'm working, or 7 years I'm working on that topic, we had discussions about like some 100,000 of people after 2016 trying to enter the European Union to ask for asylum per year, some 100,000 people per year. And the discussion was pretty much about, no, we cannot take more of these people. The boat is full, actually. And now we are experiencing that was obviously a lie. So we do not have a matter of capacity or something, at least not the real matter of capacity, if we are able to welcome some million Ukrainians in some weeks in the European Union. So in general, I just wanted to start with that. It's a matter of political will, what we are experiencing. It's not a matter of our possibilities. So, and what we were experiencing the last years, and it's somehow connected to that topic, that we need political will to solve problems, is, from my perspective, that we are not willing to respect fundamental rights at the external borders. We are not willing to speak about the reality at the external borders as the European Union. And I experienced it several times, not only in Croatia, for example, but also in Greece. But let's start with Croatia. I went there several times, and it's pretty interesting that if you are talking to officials on the one side of the border, the Croatian border, you hear stories about how they are protecting the border, but how they are also comply with the fundamental rights, with the European law. Everything is pretty fine. And of course, nobody would ever beat someone somewhere. And if you just like 2 kilometers, if you just drive through the border and 2 kilometers away, you see refugees or migrants or whatever, yeah. And you see that everybody experienced pushbacks, and almost everybody experienced violence, not only one time or something. It's just what people call the game, that many people, like groups of people, can tell you how they tried to ask for asylum several times, 7 times, 10 times, 22 times. And this like difference from a lie on the one hand and a very, very obvious situation on the other hand is kind of like how can that happen in the European Union, that we create such a big lie, which is not only present when you talk to officials in Croatia, and where it actually like also leads to some like conspiracy theories. So I talked to the interior minister, and the secretary of state actually said in a meeting that all these accusations about fundamental rights violations and pushbacks, all these accusations are not true, but she knows who is behind that story, and she don't want to tell the name of the person, but it's one person who is very rich. And that's a position of the Croatian government when it comes to the accusations of pushbacks. And I kind of what I understand is that some people, also governments, are willing to speak about conspiracy theories. What I don't understand is that 26 other member states have governments who are not really willing to actually push a little bit for the respect of fundamental rights. And what I don't understand is that the European Commission is not capable of enforcing European law. So I have the feeling, and maybe also some experience, that the European Commission is actually not willing to enforce European law at the external borders, and that they are not willing to bring some bridges between these realities in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, because they're, for example, just trying to, and I think the Spiegel also reported about it, that they're changing some reporting, that they are trying to speak about several things, but not about others, and that you can ask questions and don't get the answers. For example, if you ask them about how the human rights monitoring mechanism in Croatia is working, and they ask Croatia to give some evidence how it is working and whatever, and they receive a report where they understand, oh, that's not really a fundamental rights monitoring mechanism, as we need them to, like, oh, we cannot send this report to the MEP. So let's do some minor changes on that, or maybe like let's just rewrite it, actually. And they, like the European Commission, actually, that was a situation which we experienced, because the European Commission had some discussions via email about how, if it creates a scandal if they send it to the MEP, so if they, like, how they change it, that it not create a scandal. So they're basically just trying to support the Croatian government and not the European law. And we know that because they unfortunately sent not just the result of the discussion via email to MEPs, but all the discussion under that email thread. So, so we know pretty exactly that they were trying to lie to the European Parliament. And all this, like, it's just like some stories of that. All this comes together to a situation where you don't have like one border at the European Union where we have these kind of problems, and it's actually big problems because it's like fundamentally against the European values and the European laws. And I'm also trying to ask myself, like what do I do in the parliament if we discuss laws, trying to find majorities, and then we have some successes and maybe some compromises, and in the end nobody's caring about what the law is, but just doing what they want to do. So that's not really how democracy should look like. And in the end, it's also like, I went several times to Greece, and I know that's not the topic of the discussion today, but I think it's somehow connected, that we understand that it's not a matter of just Croatia or just one country or just the Balkans, but it's also a situation which we have at every external border of the European Union, where we are not willing to see the reality, where we are trying to create a reality where we can say as European Union, yeah, there are some problems maybe, but we are trying to look into every problem. And on the other hand, we have a reality where there is a systematic fundamental rights violation every day, like on a daily basis, for example, in Greece, where actually it is not just very obvious, but we have videos, photos, experiences from like thousands of people in the end who were pushed back by the Greek Coast Guard, and where we have a European agency, Frontex, who is not pushing back all the people, who are just trying to not look at the situation at the external border. So we have a European Border and Coast Guard agency who is actually the the watchdog of the external borders, but who is not willing to look at the external borders because maybe they see some fundamental rights violations. And so that's the short story, that in general, especially if you connect it to the situation we have with the Ukrainian refugees, from my perspective, very interesting time where we maybe also have the possibility to change something. We are trying as the European Parliament to increase the pressure on Frontex. We are trying to increase the pressure on several member states who are not acting in accordance with the European law, who really like fight against people who are just trying to see if they can ask for asylum. And I think that the core of the public discussion is, and that's maybe my last point, is about if we open or if we close the borders, but that's not the core of the discussion we need. I think that, of course, external borders of the European Union are not open borders at all. And they are also not closed borders at all. It's just that we have to have safe and secured borders at the external borders, which is also meaning that we have to respect the fundamental rights at these borders. And if somebody asks for asylum, with very good reasons, also historic reasons, why we are not able by law to just say no. If you ask for asylum, I don't care, I'll just send you back on a rubber boat to Turkey or whatever. We have these laws also from our history in the European Union that everybody who asks for asylum gets an individual assessment if this person is in need of international protection or not. And to not respect these laws is basically the core of our European asylum policy in the last years. And that's, yeah, just fundamentally wrong. Yeah, that's maybe my
before I turn the floor to anyone who would have any questions for Eric, I just wanted to ask you, do you think now with, you mentioned Ukraine, do you think this is going to be, this could be a catalyst about changing this perspective in the EU and realizing that if we can accommodate millions and millions of people without problem, then I don't know, some hundreds or thousands coming across from Turkey, for example, to Greece or through Bulgaria or whatever, it's not such a huge influx of, I don't know, domineering conquerors who want to destroy Christian values and stuff. Do you think that this might actually be a positive for what you suggested before, or it's going to be indifferent and people are just going to forget it in a couple of weeks and other stories are going to take over and stuff like this? That's number one. And my second point is, because the conference is also about perspectives, are you hopeful about the ever elusive new migration pact the European Union has been debating for I don't know since I was a baby or something? Are you hopeful that this is finally going to reach a conclusion and achieve those goals of solidarity and I don't know, allocation of burdens and stuff like this? That's all for me, for Eric.
Yeah, so I would not say that the Ukrainian situation is kind of an instrument to respect the European asylum acquis and in general, because, like, first of all, of course, there are millions of people who need support, and I'm like kind of experiencing a new step in my work that actually it's somehow enlightening when you see that 27 member states can like have a consensus on an asylum file. So in general, that's also very motivating that you can achieve something in the end. And it's good for the Ukrainian refugees who are really like, they need support at the moment, and they will need support for some years at least. So first of all, I would not say that they're kind of an instrument to do something else, just like it's very important that we support them. But of course, it's also interesting what happens to the refugees from other countries. And I would say that first point, the structure which we are creating at the moment for Ukrainian refugees, but also the approach we have with Ukrainian refugees is, from my perspective, very interesting, because of course you can use these structures also for other people, and you can also see that maybe it's a good idea to give people from the first days the right to work, give them some like social security, let them, like, the children go to school, which is not happening in some EU member states at all with refugee children. And this openness and also the ability to really like have somehow free movement also for refugees in the European Union, it will at it will create some challenges, of course, but I think in the end, maybe if we sum up the situation with the Ukrainian refugees, we can at least learn that maybe that is also a good approach, which creates less challenges. So at all in the end, and which gives people perspectives they deserve, but they which they also use in the end, and which also give maybe many people the possibility to not stay refugees for decades, but to be part of the society. So like yeah, that would maybe help us to also speak about these approaches for refugees from different parts in the world, but it's also not about millions and millions of people coming to Europe and whatever. We have a situation in Syria where many people had to flee. They're fleeing in the neighboring countries, you know, that Lebanon, Jordan, and Greece, not Greece, Turkey, for example, but also some of the people are actually fleeing to Europe, of course, for example, to Greece. And now we have a discussion in Greece, but also in the other European Union member states. So why are these people from Syria not staying in Turkey, for example? And Turkey welcomed more Syrian refugees than 27 EU member states together. Yeah? And if we kind of compare this discussion, that Greece is not actually looking to the merit of the Syrian asylum applications, but just saying, no, we are having a look if you were basically safe in Turkey. And if you were safe in Turkey because there's no war, we send you back. They're not sending back at the moment as a discussion. But in general, Greece is saying, no, if you are safe in a country close to your home country, you have to stay there. And at the moment, nobody would actually say, oh, no, you were already safe in Poland and you were already safe in Moldavia. Everybody understands that if some million people are fleeing, we have to, of course, use the power of several countries around the region to support the people and to give them some perspectives. And France is not saying, oh, no, you were already safe in Austria. At the moment, it's just like everybody understands that we have to support not only the refugees, but of course also the countries where many people are arriving. And I would assume that maybe we can connect this discussion also to the situation around Syria, and maybe also understand that not everybody can stay in Turkey. There is a war in Syria. That's just one point, but you asked also about the common European asylum system approach. I think there are some core questions. One is the solidarity between EU member states, and I hope actually that we create a system for the many, maybe 10 million Ukrainian refugees in the European Union, where we do not have a situation where every European member state can take millions of people at the moment, at least not if we are willing to support them in a human way, not just letting everybody live in tents and so on. And if there is a structure where we see, okay, some of the European member states welcomed a lot of people, some maybe less, and now let's create a fund on the European Union level to support the member states, that they can support the people a little bit better, and the member states who welcomed more receive some money, and the member states who welcomed less are paying some money. If we, for example, create a system like that, that would also be helpful for the discussions we have with the external borders and the European Union member states who are having more challenges and others without. That would be one, I think, giant step to also come to a common European asylum system, which works a little bit better. But actually, last point, I would say that we also have to understand that, and I started with that, it's a matter of political will. It's not a matter of laws we don't have to support people. Like we saw a situation in 2015 where it was possible with our European laws on the European level to welcome lots of people. And we are seeing also now, also with a little bit other like law base, we also have that it's basically possible to also welcome many million of people in some months maybe. And if we just understand that maybe we don't need new laws, but a new will to respect these laws and to just solve problems and challenges, then we maybe also see that it's not, the basic problem we have is not that we don't have a common European asylum system, but that we miss solidarity between European Union member states, and that we miss the political will to respect our laws and the fundamental rights and our European values. If we just want to respect them, maybe there's actually no big need of new laws. Can change something, but I think that these discussions about the common European asylum system are also kind of a part of the problem, because everybody wants to say, yeah, I would be in solidarity. I would be in solidarity with refugees, and I'm trying to do my best. But actually, we don't have this common European asylum system, so I can do nothing at the moment. That's a pretty easy approach we saw the last 20 years, and which is basically also a lie when we look on 2015 and to 2022, what we are able to do if we have the political will.
Right. Thanks a lot, Eric. Before we release you to your other duties, is there any question from the audience before he has to go, or about to our MEP? We move on? We move on. All right. Eric, thanks a lot. So now I turn to Joanny, who's going to do this super interesting presentation. I'm saying super interesting because I had the chance to take a sneak peek of it, and I found it really, really impressive and really depicting what's happening at the border and what those people, asylum seekers, are suffering through. So the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. I will present some key figures on migrants' arrival and reception capacities in the Western Balkans, and also some findings from recent surveys that we conducted with migrants in the Western Balkans. So perhaps I will start just by presenting some key figures on arrivals in the Western Balkans. As you know, there has been very large influx of migrants in this region since 2015. Over 1.5 million people have transited through the Western Balkans since 2015. Now, if we look at the situation since 2018, the flows have decreased, but they are still steady. And we have over 100,000 arrivals, both in 2020 and 2021, even though there were a lot more restrictions on movements following the pandemic. Just a note to mention that the rise in arrivals in airports might not be captured in the data that I present today. And the totals also don't include the Afghans that were evacuated in August, and which are still present mostly in Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. So in 2021, one of the major shifts that we see is in fact that the vast majority of migrants now transit through Serbia. This is a change from previous years where we saw a lot more movements in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 2021, Afghanistan is the main nationality registered at arrivals, followed by Pakistan and Syria. More migrants traveling in family, there are more migrants traveling in family on the Eastern Mediterranean route and in the Western Balkans than on other routes. And the relative importance of the Eastern Mediterranean route has increased from 2020, where it represented 11% of total arrivals in Europe, whereas in 2021 we saw it represents 26% of arrivals in Europe. Another trend that we see is that criminal networks are employing increasingly exploitative measures to defeat controls. And when we look at possible arrivals for the future and perspectives, we of course keep our eye on Ukraine, but also on Afghanistan, where the situation, the humanitarian situation, is still very dire. And some of the recent changes we saw also in Turkey with regards to quotas that have been decided on the presence of foreigners and the fear that it could push people on the coastal areas out, as well as the end of the refugee housing program in Greece, which again could also be a factor pushing people to move. I will just briefly present data on arrivals of Ukrainians in the Western Balkans. These are very preliminary and to be taken with caution as there might be some missing data. For instance, we don't have data on exits in all of the countries in the region. So as you can see, there has been a number of arrivals, notably in Serbia and Montenegro. This, to our knowledge, this is driven mostly by family linkages within the region. So it remains to be seen whether the Ukrainian situation will generate a large influx of migrants and refugees in the Western Balkans. This is a map of the reception facilities in the Western Balkans. And the data that we have available dates from earlier this month, the month of March. We try to collect the data for the same day, but sometimes it varies of a day or two. But as you can see, there's a number of reception facilities in the Western Balkans, most of which are operated by state authorities. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, IOM has a role in managing 4 of the 5 reception centers, but there are also 2 other refugee reception centers specialized that are managed by UNHCR and the Ministry of Human Rights and Refugees. So what you can see here, in fact, is that contrary perhaps to previous years, the capacities to accommodate migrants and refugees in the region far outweigh the numbers. This is especially true in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it's also true in Serbia, where we see, that there remains a lot of migrants and refugees on the move there. Now, of course, there are people who are not accommodated in reception centers, and we try as best as we can on a monthly basis to go out and outreach to these people to see where they're at and what they need. And so far, what we've seen this year is a decrease in the number of people staying outside of reception facilities. Now, this can be linked to various factors, most notably the winter months, which are very difficult to live in outside of centers. What should I say here? One thing that is important to note is that Serbia doesn't participate in the exercise in the region, so these data are only partial. But what we know from unofficial sources is that we would have approximately 800 to 900 migrants outside of facilities in Serbia, mostly in area of Sombor, Subotica, Kikinda. So yes, the other, of course, limitation that we have here when we assess the number of migrants, the total number of migrants in the region is that we don't visit or know all of the locations where migrants may be present. So again, this might not be completely accurate, but it's still, I think we visit on a monthly basis 150 locations or so. So And we reassess which locations are active and used, and we try as best as we can to assess how many people in total are living in those locations, despite the fact that sometimes we visit and they're out buying food or doing other things, so we don't necessarily see everyone when we visit those locations. Now, just some demographics about the people that we see outside of centers. Again, this is very much representative of what we see in Bosnia, because the vast majority of the migrants that are present outside of reception facilities are in Bosnia. And so we see that 81% of the migrants mapped are single males, 13% are children, 5% are women, 20% are traveling in family, 3% are unaccompanied or separated children. Out of all of the migrants that we have met outside of transit centers in the 5 rounds, 40% were Afghans. And out of all of the Afghans, 63%, out of all of the children, 63% are Afghans. Another key data for migrants' presence outside of facilities is that, of course, those persons are very vulnerable. 9% of them reported health and vulnerability issues. So we work really closely with our partners, including the UNHCR and the DRC here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to reach out to migrants staying outside and reduce harms and provide assistance, including medical and psychological assistance. Moving on to a survey that we conducted recently, again in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in November and December of 2021. We conducted the survey in the 5 reception centers, or TRCs, among 319 respondents. So you see the demographics here is a little different, with a larger proportion of single adult male. The survey covers a lot of areas, but I will focus mostly on the area of experience of violence, exploitation and abuse, or VEA. What we see is that more than a third of the respondents have directly experienced some form of VEA. 76% of minors, 28% of women, 42% of Afghans, and 29% of Pakistanis experience at least one form of violence, exploitation, or abuse. More than half of the migrant children surveyed reported experiencing physical violence during the journey, while migrant children from Afghanistan were also more likely to travel alone or with a facilitator, which is an indicator for us that they are a greater risk of smuggling and trafficking. In general, when we survey on these topics, it's a bit tricky to assess the likelihood of migrant smuggling or trafficking, simply because this is based on this is self-reported. So the migrant understanding of these concepts might not be really clear. But in general, identification of victims of trafficking within the mixed migration flows, it remains a challenge. Now I will move on to the 6 indicators, because they're very small now, I see, but you will see them one by one. The first indicator is physical violence. And you can see that out of all of the respondents, 22% reported having experienced physical violence. The report is detailed, and I don't want to take too much time. It's available, you can go and read, but there's a lot of details about where the experience took place, because of course we're interviewing people here in the Western Balkans, but the vast majority have been traveling the Eastern Mediterranean route. So those experiences may have happened along any of the countries on the route. So Here, yes, 53% of children having experienced physical violence. This is quite concerning. Type of violence as well is of course an area of concern for us. Moving to having worked without getting the expected payment. Again, children, 47%, very vulnerable group. Majority of these experiences happened in Greece and Turkey. Of course, and when we interview migrants, I must say that the length of stay in countries such as Turkey and Greece is very long. So the likelihood of them having had some problems and bad experience in those countries is quite high. They are more likely to have tried to find a job, you know, to be able to make some economies and to continue to travel. So indeed, they also are more likely to have experienced some unpaid work. Being kept at certain locations against their will, again, quite concerning. Those are fairly high levels, 18% for children. And this is where we see a lot of the influence of the smuggling networks and the trafficking networks coming in to play. So we know that some of the hubs in Greece, for instance, are very much hubs for criminal activities. Threatened with sexual violence, again, it's very concerning trends that you all heard of, I'm sure. And we're starting to collect more data about all of these forms of abuse. We will continue to do so in the future. Being forced to work and offered arranged marriage. So those are the 6 indicators that we collect during our survey exercise. But we're also looking at other problems and protection risks encountered during the journey. Over 80% of the respondents encountered at least one problem ranging from robberies and theft, including of their documentation, journey-related health issues, leg injuries, fever, mental health problems, lack of food, lack of shelter. 31% reporting having had health problems during the journey. 43% declared that they had suffered from hunger along the route. And 7% faced other problems with the authorities. So I think, if I remember correctly, it's only 12% of the respondents who did not report any problems. Now, the cost of the journey, we collect some data about how much people had to pay to travel. And you can see over 19% reported having paid over 10,000 USD. When it comes to travel mode, 57% of the migrants interviewed were traveling alone or with a facilitator. 10% of female respondents were traveling alone. Only 7 respondents reported to have been traveling with facilitators. This is 4%, but we know, of course, that it's probably much higher, including 3 children from Afghanistan. But again, that depends on your definition of facilitators and so on. So since it's self-reported, 71% of those traveling with the facilitators reported having experienced at least one form of violence, and more than a third of the respondents reported that the estimated cost of the journey was between 5,000 and 10,000 USD. Regarding readmission, 24% of respondents reported that they had been readmitted at least once. 38% of them declared this happened between 2 and 5 times during the journey, followed by 27% who declared it happened only once, 18% reported it happened between 6 and 10 times, and 17% of the respondents declared it happened more than 11 times. So all of these data are available in the report for your information. Just very briefly on the intended destinations based on the country of origin. Italy, Germany, and France are the most frequently mentioned countries of intended destination. The final destination for the two main groups of nationalities, namely Afghans and Pakistanis, somewhat differ. So more than half of the Pakistanis that we met were more inclined to go to Italy, while for the Afghans, 41% said their intended destination was Germany. 54% of the respondents did not have family members in the countries of intended destination. 12% had first-line relatives in the EU. And of those, 75% declares that they had not tried to reunify with their family members through legal procedures. With regards to the legal status at the time of the interview, 42% did not have documentation, followed by 31% who declared that they had obtained refugee status. 17% did not answer, and 10% stated that they had applied for asylum. For all of three main destination countries, half of the migrants interviewed declared they had information on asylum procedures and how to obtain documents to stay legally in the country. And lastly, 5% of the respondents said that they were interested to get information about staying in the country, in this case in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I don't know if I'm taking too much time, actually. I can stop here maybe, and if there's more question, I can perhaps present some of the other slides that
yes.
I have.
Right. Thank you so much. I think what struck me the most in this presentation is like the suffering of children, right? I mean, this is like, I don't know, close to 80% go hungry at some point or another. So a big question about the IOM now is that, and other big organizations. First of all, do you consider all those reports credible, or is it because many people will tell you they will say anything just to get a better chance at asylum or whatever? Do you do an evaluation of what you're being told? Do you believe those people? Do you believe that they suffered what they said they suffered? That's my first question.
Yeah, I mean, in short, yes, of course, we believe them. I think that this is just, for us, we explained the purpose of the survey at the beginning, and I think that people who accept to respond, they understand there's nothing at the end of it except for reporting their experiences, because this survey covers a number of other topics, including their experience, work experience, skills, education, and so on. On experience of violence and abuse, yes, I think again, like I said, this is self-reported. The definition of the concept might not always be understood or mutually equal, but at the same time, I think that these data very much support the accounts that have been very well laid out by the presenters during this conference, and that we see in other reports. And
exactly.
So our aim is to document these phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I think that to a certain extent, this is representative of the experiences of migrants.
And after documentation, what happens? I mean, you take these results, these horrifying results to the governments or to other institutions, and then? Yes,
I mean, indeed, our aim is to document experiences of abuse, document the experiences of migrants along the route, We present, the reports are public. We support evidence-based decision-making, informed discussions about migration. And we try through these reports, through these evidence to indeed influence to a certain extent how we can address and respond to the needs.
And the government's response to you is what? Is it like, we'll look into it, or we'll create a committee to investigate, or?
No, I think that what's important to understand here is it's a route-based survey. Mm-hmm. So I cannot attest to what the governments in Greece or Turkey will think about the results of this survey, mm-hmm. which was released 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Perhaps other presenters can tackle this point. All I can say is, from our point of view, it's really important to rely on evidence and to produce data that are up to date and that accurately depict what's happening. And after that, to use this information to advocate with the member states in the region. So here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, of course, we are coordinating very closely the migration response with other UN partners, mm-hmm. And as much as possible, aiming to foster the leadership of the state and in leading the response and providing assistance, protection assistance to the migrants. And we're here to support this for when they are here in Bosnia. Mm-hmm.
And just a final point, one of your main policies, which is the repatriation of people from those countries back home, you give them incentives, including money and flights and assistance back home. You've been criticized that this is some sort of pressuring and exploitation of the vulnerability and very dire situation that those people are facing in those countries, and that essentially they have no other choice but accept it. Do you have any response to this this program that IOM is implementing?
I think that what's important to keep in mind is that return and reintegration is one option. It should not be the only option, and this is very much our position as IOM. That, in the Western Balkans and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, more specifically, we are no longer in 2018 in a crisis moment, and we try to build a system that is a governance system that is humane, orderly, and safe, and to work with our government counterparts, the state authorities, to do that. Ideally, there should be solutions that are tailored to the profile and experience and background of the persons. Mm-hmm. And of course, this assessment is individual, and based on this assessment, there should be options and solutions. I don't think there's too many options and solutions right now for the people transiting in the Western Balkans, mm-hmm. right? And what's a bit sad, in fact, is that people tend to stay for very long in Bosnia and Herzegovina in particular. Mm. We see that people stay for over 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. In fact, I have the data here that we have 43% of people staying over 6 months, which is very long. Yeah. Okay, so what we're trying to do as much as possible is to find some ways to spend this time productively, to provide information on the rights, and yes, return and reintegration is one of the options that is available to people when they are at the end of the road, in the sense that when they're really tired, there could have been some changes also in their individual situation. Mm-hmm. The situation in a country of origin could have changed or improved. They could have some family members that are sick. They can long home. And in that sense, I think that return and reintegration is a really good option for some people.
Benign option. All right.
And you know, when you look at the return numbers here in this region, I think for Bosnia and Herzegovina, last year it was 200 people that were assisted with return and reintegration out of 15,700 migrants who transited in the country. Right. So it represents what, like 1%, less than 2% of the people.
Right.
So it's a voluntary process, right?
Yes.
And for some people, it's a good option.
All right. Thank you so much. So shall we move to you, please? So Sarah is now going to be discussing about your specific work on advocacy and all the legal steps you've taken, and especially this super important case and that. So I give you the floor. It's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who's here with us, live or online. I would start with pushbacks in general. We are actually talking about a practice of unlawful and violent expulsions that has been happening for 6 years already. There were so many reports from institutions, including Croatian Ombudswoman, also from international and domestic NGOs, from thousands and thousands of victims who share their testimonies, as well as evidence, medical documentation, and so on. And we even had testimonies of police officers, several in the last couple of years. Despite all that, pushbacks are unfortunately still everyday reality in Croatia. I would first just go over some numbers really quickly to give you some scope of the extent of pushbacks happening from Croatia. For example, having in mind the past 2 years, the pandemic years, so 2020 and 2021, Border Violence Monitoring Network recorded almost 5,000 persons being pushed back from Croatia or being victims of chain pushbacks, which happened from Italy, Slovenia, or Austria through Croatia, then further to Bosnia and Herzegovina or Serbia. DRC recorded more than 25,000 pushbacks, where some people were pushed back multiple times within these numbers. At the Center for Peace Studies, we have been receiving inquiries from people accessing Croatian territory. Yesterday, Tajana was explaining a bit more the context of criminalization of solidarity in Croatia, which does not really allow us to be present anywhere, near the borders, where we could assist directly people who are already in Croatian territory and wanting to seek asylum. So because of that, we are only able to provide them support through telephone and inform the authorities, but also independent institutions such as the Ombudswoman and Ombudswoman for Children when refugees and other migrants turn to us for help. From November 2020 until September 2021, we received almost 300 inquiries, which concerned more than 1,000 people. And in half of these groups were also children. At least 43 of those groups were illegally expelled from Croatia. And we only have actually 10 groups for which we are sure that they were able to seek asylum in Croatia. And this is only our small statistic of one NGO which is not able to be present anywhere near the border. This unfortunately shows the pattern that has been ongoing for the past 6 years, where people testified to us about waiting for the police to arrive, sometimes even a couple of days, even though we were contacting them and the ambulance in some difficult cases, We had the issue of the ambulance not willing to arrive to the area because they are waiting for police approval in order to find people. And we experienced some very harsh moments where people were pushed back, not several times, but for example, we had one group that has been pushed back for 16 times and one family that had suffered pushbacks for 30 times already. Another issue that we then have here is this immense mistrust of people in the system, where the only institution that is able to grant them access to asylum, which is the Ministry of the Interior, is basically the institution which is constantly violating their human rights and not allowing them to access their basic rights. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we actually witnessed a severe so-called, increase of violence and violent practices during pushbacks, which was even more helped by complete media attention focused on pandemic, but also on the earthquakes happening in Croatia, which basically somehow allowed for this topic to stay not really covered, or covered only by media who generally do take interest in the topic of human rights of people on the move, but mainstream media were not really covering the topic. In the past 2 years, we had several cases of really brutal inhuman treatment and torture, which included marking crosses on people's heads with orange spray, rubbing sugar, ketchup, and mayonnaise into their wounds, tying people to trees, shooting at them or near them, pointing guns at them, including children, hitting their heads against the doors of police vehicles. We even had a couple of cases of rape. And we even witnessed pushbacks of pregnant women or mothers with infants. And here especially I would like to point out also the treatment of unaccompanied children. I'm really happy that a part of you here in Sarajevo had the opportunity yesterday to see Shadow Game, the movie that really depicts beautifully but also terribly what children are actually going through on their way through Europe, seeking safety, and how actually they are treated by the police, not only Croatian police, but every police on their way, as adults, and in a very, very violent way, completely ignoring any human right that they should have. I believe that also Hannah later on will mention one case concerning minors pushed back from Croatia. Here I would like to give you a short overview of our legal cases. So from 2017 until today, we actually filed 12 criminal complaints against Croatian police authorities, and 10 of them were regarding pushbacks. Only in the past 2 years, there were 5 cases that we filed regarding pushbacks from Croatia. And here actually we had also, I must highlight this, very great support of a DRC team working on pushbacks, who actually made it possible for us to access the victims, especially during the pandemic when the measures were really tough and we were not able to travel to Bosnia and Herzegovina. where they actually allowed us to get in contact with the victims, but also collect the evidence, collect the medical documentation, and actually helped us to really bring some cases forward. It's really important to highlight here as well how difficult it is to prepare cases which concern pushbacks. First of all, because people are extremely afraid of the police, because they are still stuck here and they need to cross that country again in order to be able to seek asylum and have some dignified, life circumstances and conditions. And second of all, the fact that it is very difficult to gather evidence. Very often people are afraid to speak right away. It is very difficult if the medical staff does not provide full reports, which we have witnessed, for example, in Croatia, people not being, medical staff being scared to actually provide the right diagnosis and to really say where did the injuries come from. So this is like really a circle of so many patterns that make it really hard for people to come forward. And basically having in mind that pushbacks are happening out of any kind of legally prescribed procedure, where it's basically impossible then to somehow argue against them. I would like to point out the problem of lack of investigations in Croatia. Even with our file of 12 criminal complaints in the last couple of years, it's incredible how long these procedures take. For example, in one case, we were contacted for the first time by the authorities almost 2 years after filing the criminal complaint. When talking about migration, it's practically impossible to, know the whereabouts of people 2 years later, or have the exact data at that point. And it actually shows the lack of any kind of political will to really tackle the issue of pushbacks in Croatia. Also, what happens is that the procedures not only are lengthy, but they also lack independence, because in most of the investigations, which were not at all effective, happened that, for example, state attorneys simply confirmed the findings of police officers and did not take in consideration any other evidence or testimonies that were available. And this is really a big issue that can really transfer to all of the cases that we have been working on. But I think that the case of Madina Husini is definitely the one that can portray it in a really painful way. To just shortly summarize for those who are listening here or online and who are maybe not aware of the case. So little Madina Husini was a 6-year-old Afghan girl who was traveling with her mother and siblings from Serbia to Croatia in 2017. And they reached Croatia and they wanted to seek asylum, but police officers pushed them back near the border area with Serbia and forced them to walk back on train tracks. It was night and the train arrived, and little Madina lost her life. Later on, her family tried to access Croatia several more times. And when they finally managed, this is actually when further problems for them started. About a part of them, Tajana was also speaking yesterday as Center for Peace Studies and Are You Serious, as organizations who were involved in a case, went through a lot of pressures from the Ministry of Interior. And Are You Serious even faced charges against their volunteer exactly because of this case. that was only the beginning of all the suffering for the family, who was actually enabled to speak with their lawyer and so on. So basically, we were actually forced to bring this court to the European, to bring this case to the European Court of Human Rights because there was a real threat for them to be refoulement again in Serbia and possibly even further. Finally, after 4 years, which really gives us an image how long these strategic litigation cases last, and how sometimes we all lose any kind of hope that something will happen, and we think that even our work is completely in vain and that nothing will change. However, 4 years after Madina's death, in November 2021, the European Court of Human Rights finally made a judgment in the case and confirmed that Croatia has been illegally expelling people. So basically, the European Court of Human Rights admitted that Croatia violated Madina's right to life by lacking to conduct an effective investigation. Also that Croatia violated the prohibition of torture and inhumane treatment by keeping children in detention and separated from their parents. And this detention lasted almost 3 months. Also that Croatia violated the right to security and liberty of the whole family, but also that it violated the right to individual petition by not allowing their contact with the lawyer, and most importantly that Croatia violated the prohibition of collective expulsion, which was basically the first international confirmation that Croatia is really illegally expelling people. What I also must highlight here is having in mind the talks about criminalization of solidarity yesterday. Exactly in this case, even the European Court of Human Rights concluded that all the pressures and intimidations that the family faced, that their lawyer Sanja Bezbradica-Jelavić faced, and that also Center for Peace Studies and Are You Serious faced, were actually done with the purpose of stopping family from reaching Strasbourg. And this is something that has been officially put in the ruling, which gives us a very clear impression of how Croatian authorities are working in this matter. And Eric also had some good points on that in the beginning.
Sorry, we're running a bit of time. I'll have to cut you just for a moment, okay, for just go to Hannah, who should be there. Hannah, hello. Sorry. Hello. So we have like a brief presentation from you, and then perhaps we can open the floor for some questions from via Zoom or our audience here. Please, I believe you will put the whole thing into a wider EU perspective, right? The whole pushback and criminalization thing in the EU. Please take the floor and.
Thank you, Georgios. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Okay. How long do you give me?
Damir. Where is he? He's the
okay.
CEO. He's the CEO. I think it's 10 minutes, I think would be nice.
Okay, great. I'll first of all, thank you so ever much for having me today, and flat apologies for not being there in person. I would really have loved to be there. There's a number of people in the panel, in the audience, that I know I would have loved to see again or to meet for the first time in person. I had to be in Berlin yesterday, so I couldn't be in Sarajevo this morning, but I'm really sad about that. Secondly, I'll try to make myself useful, because I think Sarah has done an incredible work at presenting the situation, and I have the greatest of respect for Sienna's work, and it must be said. So at the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, we've been litigating pushbacks since 2014. And I have been there from the start. And I say that because I think we need to put Croatian pushbacks back into the European context. So when we started, we were working on Spain, so quite a different context, but actually sort of the same, you know, not modus operandi, but strategies from the state. And at the time, it was mainly Spain and Greece doing these pushbacks. And they were kind of, I mean, of course, pushbacks were happening sometimes in other borders, but Spain and Greece were the ones that were seen kind of like, the exceptional countries that were not respecting EU law. And back then, the EU Commission was quite strong in condemning Spanish pushbacks. So when we started, we just thought like, how weird that, that hasn't been litigated. Easy case, let's go to Strasbourg. The law is clearly on our side. The politicians are on our side. It just needs to be done. We had no way of predicting the 2015 summer of migration and the followed sort of closure of borders. And of course, that Spanish litigation was actually a really, bitter taste because we had a horrible, horrible final judgment from Strasbourg that was absolutely not protective of refugees and migrants' rights, quite to the contrary. But one has to reflect about what does it mean to close borders? What does it mean to protect borders? And we know what that means, right? It means pushing people back. So from that time, from the shutdown of the Western Balkan route, it was quite clear that the dark side or the unofficial side of that political European decision was that pushbacks would be used systematically as a main tool of border control. And I think that really needs to be said time and time again, because the EU will always speak about border protection, and we need to be saying that means pushbacks. That means, widely used systematic violent pushbacks. That's what it means. And I wanted to frame my intervention today into the answers that we've been having from the EU, threefold. Like first, we had this, this really sounds terrible. If it's verified, it should go to court. So we've heard that a lot from representatives of the EU Commission. We will see if the reports are verified and what the courts say about it. A second one has been this focus on the independent monitoring border mechanism. And the third one, which doesn't come from the Commission, but from EU countries lately, with developments at the Polish-Belarusian border, has been, what about legalizing pushbacks? And I will start with this last one, because that's the one that gets me the angriest, maybe. Pushbacks cannot be legalized because the very point of a pushback is to escape the law. So I think there is a lot of debate about whether we should be using the term pushback at all, because some people argue that it's a euphemism for horrible, horrible human rights violations that can go, anywhere from a summary expulsion all the way to a death and everything in between. But I think that you can also argue that pushbacks are a specific way of a state to take people outside of all of the frameworks and regulations and protections that exist and that should be applied. And therefore, anything can happen. And so the very idea of legal pushback is like legalizing torture. It just doesn't work together. It doesn't make any sense. And there's been, I know, attempts to, put pushbacks in national law by Spain, by Hungary, and by Poland. But these attempts have been strongly rejected by courts, and in particular, the European Court of Human Rights and the European Court of Justice, so EU law and European Convention of Human Rights. And both courts have been really clear about the fact that there are no circumstances, none, where you can say, we're just going to suspend the applicability of the law. So you can create like a parallel system. We've seen that happen with the hotspots in Greece. Like you can suspend the general asylum procedure and create a fast track thing, diversion, that you can do. But to suspend altogether any sort of legal and regulatory framework is not possible. It's not possible officially, which is why pushbacks will remain covered state policies. And so going to that, the argument to say, you know, in certain circumstances, we should be able to legalize pushbacks when people come in big groups. You know, we can deal with individual asylum seekers, but the big groups we can't deal with. Well, first of all, it's a lie, because we know very well that at the border crossings of Europe, people do not have access to asylum applications. We know that, they know that, there are no legal pathways. This is news to nobody. Second of all, the prohibition of collective expulsions, which is one of the prohibitions against pushbacks, is precisely about collective expulsions. So to then say, well, if it's a collective, we cannot apply it, is ridiculous. You know, big groups. Thirdly, the disruptive argument is also ridiculous. Wars are disruptive. Life is disruptive, and we need to deal with the groups of refugees and migrants at our borders. And we can't just say they're disruptive. We're just going to shut down our laws. That makes no sense either. And I would say, thirdly, the fact that there are no legal pathways mean that people have to act collectively. They have to travel collectively. Otherwise, it is too dangerous. And it's another cruelty to then use that collectiveness against them to shut them down from the protection of the law. So in what ways pushbacks, I mean, you know, I've said that they're intrinsically illegal pushbacks. And of course, one can think of the violence, that's the obvious sort of illegality of them. But some pushbacks, in some cases, there may, I mean, we've had cases where there was no violence. This can happen if people are lucky. But the point is, that's just being lucky, because once you're taken outside of the protection of the law, again, anything can happen to you, because there's no record of you ever being in the hands of the law enforcers that have control of you. So there is the illegality will be through the violence, through the detention. There are certain frameworks that regulate the detention of migrants and refugees, and in a pushback, none of these are respected. And of course, access to protection and asylum is another side of that illegality. But I would say beyond that, it's the fact that you're in the hands of law enforcers is not registered and not recorded. And the activities of law enforcers are actually quite heavily regulated, precisely because they have so much power over you. And I think in that very core is already where the problem lies. Even if someone doesn't have an asylum claim or is not detained or is not beaten up, the fact that they're in the hands of law enforcers and that this act is not registered anywhere is already a huge problem. And to me, in terms of legal sort of argumentation, it translates into, or even in terms of political argumentation, you know, in the discourse, there's so much speaking of illegal migrants and illegal crossings. So the idea of the people that are pushed back breaking the law is really there. But then the law is completely disapplied. There's like a weird, a weird phenomenon happening there in the discourse. And that translates, there are provisions about that. That is to see people as legal objects that you can pretend that you're regulating by saying that they're doing something illegal, but you're refusing to see that they have rights and that they're legal subjects. And this is one of the points. So I'm going to need a bit more time. We have two cases pending against Croatia. One of them is in front of the European Court of Human Rights. So and hopefully it's going to be a follow-up to the Medina case, but hopefully it will be a positive one. It's SB and others versus Croatia, and we're waiting for a judgment. Everything's been done. But I would say that, you know, the Medina case is a horrible case. Every pushback is, you know, bad. This case is about 3 men. One of them was an unaccompanied minor at the time. I just wonder how the court is going to react when the case is not about a family and the death of a 6-year-old little girl, which is quite extreme circumstances. And the case is about, you know, the prohibition of collective expulsions that is involved in pushbacks, but it's also about the conditions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this was, you know, this is late 2018 conditions, so before the IM camps were actually open. But the court will have to say something about how pushbacks and the conditions of Bosnia and Herzegovina interact. The violence There was some violence in some cases. The violence was not part of the case because in law, for the violence, theoretically, you have to go through national courts, and we consider that going through Croatian criminal courts doesn't make any sense for the reasons that Sarah said, and for the reasons that the Committee for the Prevention of Torture also said, that there is no independent investigative body in Croatia when it comes, when we talk about the violence during the pushbacks. It's just, there is no way to get an effective investigation. But for some reason, the court wanted us to include that. So it's not a claim that we made, but the court wanted us to speak about how the treatment of the applicants violated their rights under the convention. And the second case is one that is in front of the Human Rights Committee. Because of the different procedural rules of the Human Rights Committee, we were actually able to include 6 subsequent pushbacks. So that case shows how many times people go through pushbacks. And it's also about many of the same sort of legal grounds, but one extra provision that there is in front of the Human Rights Committee is that idea of legal subjectivity. And we're quite happy that we were able to include that, because we really think it goes at the core of why pushbacks are problematic. I will briefly go to the points that I was making about the answers of the EU. If verified by the courts, this is not for the courts to decide. It is a policy issue that needs a policy answer. And I think the idea that we need to see whether the courts will say whether the pushbacks are actually happening is incredible and ludicrous, because we have all of the reports that we need from the highest institutions. So we don't need the courts to find that this is happening, and actually they already have. So in the Medina case, the Strasbourg court said, in between the lines, there is evidence of a systematic policy. So, we've got that covered, but also politicians cannot hide behind courts. Courts are not there to regiment our lives. They're there to find violations. And the political institutions are the ones that are the policymakers, and they have to do it. On the independent monitoring border mechanism, I also get a bit, I think it's also another diversion. Like, I'm sorry, we already have institutions that have decades long of experience in monitoring what law enforcers do. And I'm thinking in particular of the Committee for the Prevention of Torture, but I'm also thinking of the national prevention mechanisms under the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture. And these are institutions that really took decades to develop a methodology and rules about how to look at what law enforcers do, how to do a fact-finding mission effectively, and what stops abuse by law enforcers. And they are doing that job, and they are making these findings, and these findings are being ignored, and we're diverted into talking about yet another new mechanism that would need years and years to be adequate. So that's I'm also angry about. And yeah, those are all the points very briefly.
Thank you so much, and happy birthday, I think, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, thank
okay.
you.
All right. Thanks for doing this for us on your birthday then. So we now have like a quarter of an hour just for questions. I'm going to start with a person from Zoom. The question is for you. It says, does the IOM support authorities in Bosnia which force people on the move to move into camps and then destroy their accommodations and possessions, e.g. in Velika Kladuša? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly. And if so, do you think such activities could have an influence on the reliability of the data taken from surveys among people on the move?
Of course, the short answer is no. It's always a bit surprising to hear, I think that we have to replace the role of IOM and the role of a humanitarian organization who assists migrants and very much work towards a upholding the human rights of migrants. And we do that by working with state members, with migrants, with the civil society, and with all partners that are there to work towards the same goals. Look, I think if it's possible, I would like to maybe use some of the slides that I have to show you a little bit the life in the transit centers, because of course, I mean, we're using a lot of the shocking pictures from the beginning of the crisis in 2018, but I think it's important to recognize that the situation has improved significantly in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the sense that there are now safe, well-organized accommodation centers that provide a range of assistance to migrants on the move. Accommodation in the centers is entirely voluntary. I want to say the migration response in Bosnia and Herzegovina is supported by partners including IOM, UNHCR, UNICEF, UNFPA, DRC, and a number of local organizations now. This number has been rising over the years. Let me pull this slides. These are some of the images that we could see from 2018, but nowadays, this is a bit more, I would say, an accurate depiction of how migration, is managed within this region. For us, the transition to a state-owned response is our main priority at this point. We have a clear transition plan for gradual transfer of management of the TRCs to the Service for Foreign Affairs over the next 3 years. We also work towards a transition plan for the public health insurance-based mechanism for the provision of health services to migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. The safety of migrants is of utmost importance. We have clear procedures to ensure security, including centers dedicated to family and safe zones for vulnerable groups. In the centers, migrants have access to, of course, shelter, food, basic items such as clothes, shoes, blankets, hygienic products. They have access to laundry services. They have access to community kitchens. There are information boards everywhere to provide information about the services available and provided by the partners. We have community representative meetings taking place on a weekly basis to discuss with the migrants their needs, their concerns, the challenges, the solutions. We have feedback and complaint mechanisms that are anonymous that we monitor with all of partners, UN partners and local partners. We have, numerous organizations present daily to provide assistance in the centers, including health, mental health, recreational activities. Children are enrolled in school programs now in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There's sewing activities, there's woodworking, there's computer literacy. So these are some of the pictures that I pulled through just to show you a little bit the daily life in the center. It's not to say, of course, that it's an ideal place to raise a family or that it's always pleasant to share accommodation with other migrants. But it's just to kind of reestablish the fact that we've come a long way since 2018. And in that sense, the reduction of the people outside of reception centers is a good indicator. And I think the fact that it's much easier to live in than out. And those who decide to live out, during the time of COVID, perhaps it was related to the mandatory isolation period, because it was, of course, mandatory, so a bit more difficult perhaps for some of the migrants to accept that. But nowadays, I think, we need to keep in mind that the fact that some migrants decide to stay outside of centers also very much related to the influence that the smugglers have on them. The fact that they want to keep them mobile. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. There's someone. There's a lot of questions to the audience. Okay.
I thank you for the intervention, and I just want to make a few comments on this last point. So it's a long time I don't see the camp in Bosnia, but I know the one in Greece, and I used to know the one in Serbia. Well, there is a fundamental question that we should ask to ourselves: why people should live in this place? Why they should have like a separate system of living from the rest of the society? Why we should advertise camp and encampment? Why, as we see now today with the crisis in Ukraine, why people cannot just stay in cities and, you know, in villages, in the buildings, in the apartment next to us? So I think that's a question that I always come to my mind when, you know, I hear that, okay, actually the camps improved and, you know, now there are better services, but why there should be like a separate system of health, or why people that are moving should live in a different way? So this is one of, it's a rhetorical question, of course. I think we can all understand that. And isn't it that then, looking into the strategy, then we discover that these people are actually marginalized in a nice way or in a brutal way? You know, we can argue about that. And this is the story also of many other minorities in Europe for hundreds of years. So are we not just reproducing the same system of exclusions, which is a social exclusion, it's like political exclusions, it's an exclusion from social rights, and not even talk about human rights? Thank you.
If I may just add a few points, but of course it's a very incomplete answer, but I think, I mean, the response for the Ukrainians is very different in the sense that perhaps they have some means that migrants, asylum seekers and refugees who travel through the Western Balkans don't have anymore. And in that sense, accommodation in hotels, private accommodation, there are some people who do have the resources to afford it. But it's not everyone. And in that sense, for us, it's a way to, of course, it's a patch a little bit on a problem that is much bigger, but it's a way to provide a safe and humane and dignified way for people to stay for the length of time that they will stay. And I would say also, in terms of our priorities, that we very much now advocate for more social inclusion programs, especially for those who might not qualify for asylum, but have other protection needs and will likely stay for longer term in Bosnia. So for smaller, more community-based accommodation shelters. So this, looking forward, this is very much a model that we will be looking at.
Okay, we have Ms. Gudrun Steinecker via Zoom. She used to be the ambassador of Germany to Skopje in North Macedonia. She should be coming on now. She has a question or a comment, I believe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, pretty well.
Yeah, I'm just following your discussion because I have been dealing with these issues indeed before when I was an ambassador. We had also in now North Macedonia and in Montenegro we had also refugees coming from other countries. It was not, there were not so many, but in 2015, I was ambassador in Montenegro. And fortunately for Montenegro, I must say at that time, the majority of refugees did not cross through Montenegro. Actually, the number was very small. And therefore I had not very much to do with it. But yeah, for me, the question is how to regulate the refugees coming through non-EU countries in Europe and wanting to enter the EU. I think pushbacks are not acceptable for me, but how to stop it, because the reality is that the majority of EU countries are grateful that Hungary as well as Croatia are not letting refugees from particularly Middle East and Africa through. And there are some good ideas by Mr. Knaus and his organization, but the reality shows that there is no political will. And how will you bring about the political will?
That's a good question, actually, because you do need political will to change things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on that. Yeah, I would say that yes, political will is necessary, and we see that there is no problem of capacities in reception and providing people with dignified conditions, because we see at the moment with Ukrainians that it really is possible. I think that what we need to have in mind here then is the rule of law and the institutions that we have at our disposal, which are able to force member states to respect the laws, their national laws, European laws, but also international legal system. And in that regards, I think it's very easy for EU, because it is a general political will of EU to turn a blind eye, or I would say even support this, because when mentioning Croatia and all of these cases, it is pretty obvious that everyone knows everything. And it's impossible in 2022, after the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, after the CPT report, after the first and then the second report of the Croatian Independent Border Monitoring Mechanism report, and after many footages and excellent media covering of stories of real experiences of people on the move. After all of that, European Commission cannot claim that they don't know what's happening, or that pushbacks are something that needs to be checked or verified if it's really like that, because we have too much evidence that prove that it happens. One way of dealing with it is not allowing for people to be forced to illegally migrate from one country to another, because I think that here it's really important to point out, and Hannah already did in a way, that for many people who are stuck in the Balkans and who are trying to reach EU, there are no legal pathways for them to access safety, because person is not able to exit Serbia or Bosnia and Herzegovina without valid passport and visa that allows them to enter European Union. And for all of these people, many of which are stuck here for years already, it's impossible to get these documents. So in that way, they cannot even exit legally Beja or Serbia and access Croatia legally, or come to the border control to ask for asylum. They are forced to move illegally in order to reach safety. And this is something that European Union is very aware of. And this is a very conscious decision, very conscious political decision of whole Europe.
Can I just add something? Sorry. Thank you so much, Sarah. But really, this is a point that I have at heart, so I will take the opportunity. I think that the position that someone, for example, like Mr. Knaus is taking, I mean, good ideas, you know, just before the war in Ukraine, his idea was to take all of the Afghanis that were stuck between Belarus and Poland and send them to the Ukraine. So I'm not sure how good his ideas actually are. But I think this position that seeks to accommodate for sort of, I don't know, imagined or real European society that does not want the brown and potentially Muslim migrants in, whether or not they have protection claims, and that this, you know, this wish of theirs would be legitimate, and we need to accommodate it. I think that's what we really need to question. We have laws, we have the Refugee Convention, we have the framework that we have precisely for situations like this one, when a majority, a social majority attacks a minority. That's what we have them for. And one cannot accommodate these ideas. They're extremely violent in themselves. To just say, we don't want you because you're brown, we don't want you because you're Muslim. That's just racism, and it is not acceptable, and we do not have to accommodate it. And I think, of course, one may say political will and realism. When slavery was abolished, it did not seem realistic, and it took a lot to get the political will until it was clear that it was no longer morally acceptable, and we did not accommodate for that idea. And I think I really want to make that point, because also Europe is no longer white. There are people here that have citizenship that are brown and that are Muslim. And it's just such a violent statement. And I just wanted to say it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since we're running out of time, although the organizers, you know, they should give us 10 more minutes because we started a bit late. But nevertheless, can we do a roundup of questions that from the audience, and then collect them together, and then the panelists can address them, please?
Thank you very much for your very interesting information. I have two questions. First one is, what is the requirement for entering these very nicely depicted camps, and is applying for asylum a prerequisite for entering these camps? Because if that is the case, then it doesn't really seem to fit in the needs of the people in transit, of a population on the move. And my second question is for Croatia and the criminal cases lodged. You talked about, if I'm not mistaken, about 20 cases. It would be interesting for me to hear the result, and what were the consequences for the work of the activists and lawyers that they supported these cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a few comments and questions, actually. So first of all, you all highlighted that children is the #1 vulnerable group who are facing violence, and especially in the camps, and IOM is trying to focus on special treatment for this group of population. However, what does that mean, especially in terms of camps? I would like to hear a bit more about that. Because when I was living in 2018 and 2019 in Velika Kladuša, obviously you highlighted that the conditions were different. But when I was renting a flat very close to the border, almost every night we had minors staying over because they just could not stay in Miral camp. I mean, the violence that was happening there, and not just the intercommunal violence that has been often highlighted as the violence in the camp, but also by the security who were, you know, the staff in the camp. And this is leading to another question, because you said that there is the investigation of violence against the people on the move, but this violence is not only happening at the borders, it's also happening in the camps. There have been different allegations of people dying in a camp because they were attacked by security forces. So what is happening in terms of monitoring of the violence inside of the camp? So this is mainly towards the IOM perspective. And the final question is that you were discussing pushbacks and from the legal perspective. And I would like to ask you actually how to also consider the cases of people who not often, there's this argument by state authorities that, oh, but these people are not eligible to claim asylum, they come from Pakistan. So, but the thing with pushback, there is often the highlight that the people were denied asylum, which is illegal, and after they were pushed back. But as Hannah highlighted, there's a huge scale of what pushback means. I mean, there are people who suffer torture, sexual abuse, who don't want to claim asylum, or often the state authorities say, well, they're not eligible to claim asylum. So how to get over this narrative that there are also other people than just a proper, let's say, asylum seekers, to challenge this narrative by state authorities who say, well, whatever, these are not asylum seekers, so they should not be entering our borders and so forth. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Maybe to address the first question about the requirements for staying in the TRCs. I mean, from what I understand, most of the migrants who arrive in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they get the white, what they call the white paper, which gives them possibility to stay legally in the country for 2 weeks, 14 days. But this is not a requirement for staying in the TRCs. There are no requirement for staying in the TRCs, basically. Yeah. And to address your question about allegations of violence within the camps, they are investigated, of course. We refer them to competent authorities, especially serious incidents. At the moment, the security in the centers is ensured by private providers, but we're very much working with the Ministry of Security to have this responsibility transferred over the state authorities. We try as much as possible to protect the vulnerable groups. That's why I was mentioning safe zones for unaccompanied and separated children. So sometimes we see fence, and of course this has a very negative outlook, but it's very much also for the protection of the vulnerable categories within the centers.
Anything else? Are we through with the question? Yeah, sorry. All right.
Regarding the criminal cases, we found 12 of them since 2017, and 10 of them concern pushbacks. We had a couple of them that were rejected after a very, very long time. And basically what we realized in such cases is that they did not, first of all, do any kind of timely investigation. And the second of all, as I previously mentioned, that they completely put their trust into police and into their official statement, and took that as primary evidence of all the cases. In many of the cases, we had the moment where, for example, main evidence was not taken into consideration, where even we received answers that other parties were contacted, and for example, medical documentation was requested, but then we found out from our partners that it did not happen ever. So basically, up until today, there were no sanctions, there were no effective investigations, there was nothing, absolutely nothing done efficiently in order for any of the criminal complaints to be handled at national level. Apart from MH case concerning Madina and her family, I must also tell you, if you're not aware, that Croatia appealed to the Grand Chamber regarding this ruling. But apart from this case, we also have two other cases at the European Court of Human Rights. One is regarding detention conditions from 2015 that severely endangered one person's life. And the other one is also about actually a person who was refuged from Croatia, whose asylum claim was ignored, and who is actually a Kurdish activist, and by being deported towards Greece could face then deportation to Turkey, and of course torture and whatever we can of course imagine. Regarding the consequences for activists and lawyers, I believe Tayana made a great example yesterday with her own private case and how it affected her life and life of her partner. For Center for Peace Studies, it mainly disabled us from, for example, entering and even having access to reception centers and detention centers since 2018. Even though for almost 15 years before we were always present everywhere, and also as a provider of free legal aid. Of course, with many, we faced many accusations, public accusations done by the authorities, also facing many threats whenever we speak publicly about pushbacks and the illegal conduct of Croatian police. And of course, lawyers also suffered all of these pressures as well. And I also mentioned that Are You Serious also had concrete charges against their volunteer, who was then charged guilty and had to pay 60,000 kunas of damages. Luckily, here we found out again that people can really show solidarity and that they can collect that amount of money in less of 24 hours and give a clear message that criminalization of solidarity is not welcome in Croatia. But generally, it is a very difficult environment to work in. And regarding the asylum seekers, if I can go back to that, yes, I think it's a very important point. I think that the authorities are always coming back to those who have right, and it's actually not up to them. It's not up to any police officer present anywhere near the border or in the territory to conclude who has or has not the right to seek asylum. Every person has that right, and persons shouldn't even be forced to say the word asylum. It is actually police officers who should be trained and educated to know better and to presume that maybe some person should have access to asylum, and then for competent people to further on get into that. Also, I think here we have also a big problem of disharmony in asylum systems of various member states of EU, where, for example, asylum seekers from Afghanistan in Croatia up until last summer were completely ignored, where Afghanistan was treated as a safe country of origin, and we see very much that it's not so. Also, I would say that we have the issue of everyone being forced to go into the asylum system as the only way, because there are no other legal pathways. And this is something that I think is a long-term problem for European Union, because on the one hand, we are doing everything to bring migrant workers to fill the missing, working places in our states. And at the same time, we have people who desperately want to work and want to stay here, and we are not allowing them. And also by, forcing people to only seek asylum as the only possible option to stay, it actually brings further derogation to the asylum system, instead of, issuing other types of visas, humanitarian visas, working visas, or student visas, or any other type of support that would be needed to many people on the move.
Do we have time for one more question, or are we out? One more question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. For the International Organization for Migration, I have one comment or question, because yesterday we talked about how basically IOM kind of ignoring state decision, suggestion, offer. And so you said in case of the criminal in the camp, and you are kind of dealing with the state authority to convict these people. But we are talking about the state Bosnia-Herzegovina who are failed to convict their war criminal. And they are basically failed to convict the people who raped the woman in the street and murders. And IOM doesn't want to listen when it comes to where to set up this camp or how many people should go into camp. But IOM wants to deal with the state authority or wants them to help them in case of the murder or in case of the, I don't know, kind of the violence in the camp, what is happening. And so, I mean, it is kind of for me weird, or it is my poor understanding, sorry. I didn't understand the concept here and how something can be rejected when there is mediation and for the solution, and something when you are dealing bad side of the camp and you are expecting the state authority to help you and to save basically and clean your hand. And can you please a little bit talk about this? I'm sorry.
Thank you. I don't know if my answer will be satisfying to you, to be honest. I think it's, I mean, there's a part of your question to me that I feel like correcting slightly, in the sense that IOM does not do, we don't do what we want here, right? Like, we support the response that is led by the Ministry of Security. And the Ministry of Security is very much in charge of deciding if and how there are transit centers and where. And in that sense, we try to work again with our member states and in order to find the best possible solutions that are acceptable to them as well. I cannot comment also on the allegations because I'm not aware of all the cases really. But I can only say that serious allegations would always be investigated. There would be follow-up. There's so many international organizations who have at heart the best interest of the migrants that are present in the TRCs 24 hours per day. There's a lot of monitoring in the centers. So it's not an area where there's no rules and there's no laws, and you know, these incidents happen. There is violence and incidents in the camps. And in each case, there's investigation, there's involvement of state authorities. Of course, they are the competent authorities when it comes to investigating crimes in the centers or outside. So.
Okay, please, nobody move. We have one last question from Zoom. Okay, just for like 2 minutes. Adan asks, he says, speculation is that the amended Schengen Borders Code would legalize an extremely problematic practice of internal pushbacks, and that the proposal expands the use of monitoring and surveillance technologies to prevent irregular migration. Does this mean that the EU's response to irregular migration, again, quote unquote, is simply more policing and surveillance? Aren't there any more humane policies in sight that would be used instead?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to admit I share some of the fears because we see also with the pact, I mean, proposals of the pact, that many of the regulations are actually going in a way of making some of the now gray areas even darker and going into some kind of legalization of like complete dehumanization of migration and of robbing people of their rights. And we see that surveillance techniques are pretty much involved in the whole issue, and that there is a very obvious intention to close the borders of the EU and to make them as surveyed as possible and as secure as possible to prevent further migration. Yes, unfortunately, also having in mind that pushbacks are happening internally in the EU for the past 6 years, all the time, that chain pushbacks are a real concern, that all EU state members are actually participating in illegal expulsions of people. And by seeing also the amount of approval that, for example, Croatia is getting for accessing Schengen, and we are also very much aware that most of the practices which are happening are precisely because of our entrance to Schengen. Unfortunately, we can see that many of the practices which are illegal, which also concern bilateral readmissions, which are also one of the legal means, which is then used completely illegally to deny persons from their access to asylum. We see, unfortunately, that practice is going in that direction for quite a while now, and I think that it is our duty to stop such intentions from reaching policy documents and legal documents in the end.
Thank you all so much. I think it's been a very useful discussion. Thanks our audience and organizers. And yeah, we take a break and then come back. Thanks a lot.